Let's get to know each other. Let's come to understand what we value and we believe. Let's look at what's possible. Let's look at what is already happening, because when you build on something that's already happening, there's momentum. And then from there we say, how could this grow? Or how can we root this? Or how can we articulate this in a way that makes change locally? Because that's what's most important. My name is Leyton Schnellert, and I am an associate professor in the Faculty of Education and the Eleanor Professor of Rural Teacher Education. I work with communities to disrupt deficit orientations to living, learning, and being, particularly working with non-dominant communities to create change projects to kind of disrupt structural inequalities and move towards more inclusive education, whether it be formal or informal education. Community collaborations are central to how I work and the kind of work I do, because we co-create the directions we want to go. The goals for change come from the community, so myself and community groups and other researchers typically collaborate together to identify goals, to say what's an issue we want to address, to say where can we make a difference, and then to engage in collaborative inquiry over time that's iterative, so we're always kind of checking back in. What are we learning? Where are we going? What's happening next? So it's very much an emergent paradigm. Trust and relationship are central, and those are earned. And so it's less of a let's do a project together and more of a let's get to know each other. Let's come to understand what we value and we believe. Let's look at what's possible. Let's look at what is already happening, because when you build on something that's already happening, there's momentum. And then from there we say, how could this grow? Or how can we root this? Or how can we articulate this in a way that makes change locally, because that's what's most important, but also can inspire and impact others in other contexts. As I've moved along in my career, I've come to understand that a sweet spot, if you will, is working with school districts and teachers, as well as working with community groups. And so together, for instance, I have a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada grant that is really focused on welcoming Indigenous ways of knowing. It actually is grounded in Sean Wilson's concept of relational accountability. And so in doing that work, working with the Penticton Indian Band, the educators there, as well as Indigenous educators in Syilx Okanagan. We're taking up Syilx knowledges and ways of being in partnership to say, how can we take these up in classrooms? So we're moving away from, I need a strategy to add to my curriculum, and more towards how do we decolonize what we're doing together in partnership, so that our Syilx Nation, which is a matrilineal society, we're learning from knowledge keepers and elders who are all women, who are saying, here's what we need, here's what needs to happen. And we've been guided and supported in collaboration with Dr. Jeanette Armstrong and Dr. Bill Cohen, taking up a process called inequality. And so that is a Syilx approach to identifying issues from multiple perspectives to generate solutions together. It's almost like it takes time to understand what we could do. And so it's less about short term and more about how can we work together to make change as we come to understand our contexts, what our contexts are teaching. In our case, learning from and with the land as a teacher, which is so disruptive and so powerful in terms of decentering humanness and decentering whiteness. Another example from my work is a Social Science and Health Research Council of Canada grant, where it's called a Partnership Development Grant. So right from the very beginning, partners were working together to say, what could we focus on? What could this look like? What kind of change do we want to make in rural education? And so we have 28 rural teams across the province of British Columbia, all taking up local change initiatives, and then coming together during the year on Zoom saying, what am I learning? What am I seeing? And these projects are entirely different from each other, but the energy that comes from connecting from other educators who are interested in social justice and educational change has not only empowered them, but given them a network, so that when something does come up in their context that's possible, they know someone else in the province. They're like, oh, they're doing something like that in Haida Gwaii with ocean food security, or I know what they're doing in Crawford Bay. They're taking up multi-age classrooms in a way that has a project-based learning focus. And so the work is also about networks connecting with networks in ways where the researcher doesn't need to be central, but we're all part. It's almost like we leave our titles at the door and say, we're all researchers together making change, and let's see what comes up in terms of our foci. One other project I could highlight has been a partnership between the Community Living Society, the Massey Theatre in New Westminster, and the Canadian Institute for Inclusion and Citizenship. We call it applied theatre, and what you do is you create messages based on lived experience to say, what do we want to communicate to the community to disrupt assumptions, biases, and things that limit our lives. Our current project focuses on employment, again, decided by our company of self-advocates, and how we position them is as co-creators. And so it really helps us understand that in research, we want not just organizations partnering, but we want to see the participants as having agency and ownership so that change happens not to people, but happens with and through collaboration. The change comes from those who have a voice, whose voice hasn't been recognized. We're not giving a voice, we're recognizing the voices and facilitating their communication through collaborative research.